Where am I? How long has it been? Oh my god, it's been 5 months since I've uploaded a YouTube video? Well, that's it. My channel's actually dead. I mean, is there anything I can do? Maybe I can upload a video with a ridiculous clickbait title, like Huge Mr. Beast Drama or something. Or I'll even make a YouTube short. Is that what you want, YouTube? No. There's a better way. Wow, who would have thought? It was a glorified update video all along. But this time, instead of whining about why I couldn't upload, you know, busy with school this, lack of motivation that, this time I'm gonna show you guys what I've been working on for the past 5 months. On July 29th, 2022, I released my first game, which was called a gravity game. And as the title suggests, it was a puzzle platformer where the core mechanic was gravity. After its release, the game kinda blew up, garnering a bunch of views on YouTube and itch.io. The level editor I had in the game was even able to maintain its own small community, who sought to make the most difficult levels possible by fundamentally breaking my game. Some of you guys even made texture packs for my game, which, wow, that was just something I never would have expected. I especially liked the Minecraft one, I thought that was pretty funny. There were so many things in my game that just had a Minecraft counterpart, it was just too perfect. And with all this traction on the project, it seemed like the best thing to do going forward was to continue working on the game. Maybe release an update, or make a video about the levels that people made. And while this whole project was definitely worth pursuing, there was a problem. Python was my language of choice for writing this game, and if you know anything about Python, you know that it might just be the worst possible language for writing a game from the ground up. It's pretty slow. But this shouldn't be a problem, right? I mean, I can optimize my code, and it's not like the game's gonna be resource intensive, it's two-dimensional. How bad can it be? There was more spaghetti in my code than an Italian restaurant. And needless to say, it was a problem. The game didn't run well for anybody. Not to mention that half the people couldn't even run the game to begin with. And you think I wanted to go through all 2,500 lines of code and fix all that? Absolutely not. All motivation was just gone instantly. For those of you who made a level hoping it would appear in a video, sorry to disappoint, but thank you for making them anyway. They were really cool to play through, and I still might make a video about it on the second channel. You never know. After dropping this whole project, I decided it was time to learn an actual game engine, and after a little bit of research, I ended up finding the perfect engine for the next step in my game development journey. Gamemaker is a free game development program that was acquired by Opera GX, and it specializes in making 2D games using its own custom language called GML, which is pretty similar to Java. It might not have as many features as Unity, but it's easier to learn, and I was planning on making a 2D game anyway. So after scanning the documentation and watching a couple tutorials, I was ready to get to work. After yoinking the character texture from Gravity Game and spending 4 hours trying to get hitboxes to work properly, I eventually put together a quick maze game prototype thing. Gamemaker's room editor made it pretty convenient to mess around with all the different objects and experiment with different sizes and numbers of characters, for example, which was pretty nice. After that, I yoinked the block sprite sheet from Gravity Game and threw it into a Gamemaker tile set. And using the tile editor, I was easily able to put together a level without having to worry about the orientation of the individual block textures. Also nice. Then, after beating Celeste, I was inspired to add a dashing system to my game. But it wasn't until after writing all the code that I realized that a dash option in a game with maze movement was kinda goofy. So I decided to switch to platformer by adding some gravity. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, hold on a sec. Some gravity, there we go. The dash worked fine, but it felt like more options for movement were missing, so I took after Brawlhalla and gave the player a triple jump, as well as the ability to wall jump. Now we were headed in the right direction in terms of gameplay, but there was still one major problem. The game looked kinda dull, so I opened up Adobe Animate and created this dapper businessman. And after adding the sprite sheet to the character sprite, it maybe this will work. Oh my god! Alright, I think I got it. Let's just see if, oh no! What I meant to say is, I was able to bring the animations from Adobe Animate to Gamemaker, and linked the speed of the running animation to the player speed, making it a bit more responsive. I also adjusted the movement script so that the player maintains momentum from dashing and gains momentum while in the air, which may not be realistic, but having unlimited momentum in games makes them a lot more engaging and offers a much higher potential for mastery. The movement in Ultra Kill is the perfect example of what I'm talking about, and if you like the sound of Doom but fast, where you can punch your own bullets, shoot coins into enemies, fight the Moai emoji, and make Gianni Matrograno your mortal nemesis, I'd recommend checking it out. Then I decided that I wanted to go for a more futuristic theme, so I made a city background in Adobe Animate, and by splitting up the pieces into different layers, I was able to create the illusion of depth using a parallax effect. I then used the Gamemaker particle system to make the environment a bit more dynamic, including some smoke particles in the background, some dust particles behind the player, and some ships that fly by, which actually uses a particle system within a particle system. Particle-ception or something, I don't know, I didn't watch the movie. Then I tried to add these head-hunting drones that track down and kill the player. And the player can outmaneuver them, because they swing wider than a drunk driver. But I was having some trouble getting them to actually stay in the level. And this is unfortunately right around where I completely lost motivation to continue working on the game. You can probably see a reoccurring pattern here with these losses in motivation, but this time it wasn't because I was giving up. Instead, I had an idea that seemed more beneficial in the long run. Blender. Blender is a software for making literally anything related to the third dimension, for free. The best way I can describe this is, Blender is to 3D modeling as DaVinci Resolve is to video editing. An all-in-one super capable program for the low price of free. And my interest in learning Blender peaked when I was watching some Krugston videos on YouTube, and beforehand, I always saw Blender as a program that would make these super shiny, realistic physics demos. But after realizing that such stylization was actually possible with Blender, I instantly hopped on board. This sold me because in the past 5 years, there's been a revolution in the animation industry as, rather than trying to look hyper-realistic, animation studios have been experimenting with styles that blend other mediums. For example, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse looks like a moving comic book. And every texture in the new Puss in Boots movie is painted to look like a fairy tale picture book. And this level of creativity in mainstream animation is pretty incredible. There's a handful of YouTubers who are also forming experimental 3D animation styles, such as Krugston, Funk, James Lee, and this Russian guy with 200 subscribers that popped up on my recommended. And in my opinion, these guys make some of the best content on the platform. So I figured I should also give 3D a try and see if I can also bring my content to the next level. So I downloaded Blender and got started with the 3D modeling rite of passage, the legendary Blender Donut tutorial.
You just opened Blender for the first time and then you've tried to...
And at the end of the tutorial, my donut looked like this. Oh, wait, that doesn't look like the thumbnail.
And then join me in part 2, which is...
Oh, I see, there's a second part, of course. Alright, let's go.
Okay, so play with your donut, get something that you like, and then join me in the next part as we...
Wait, hold on a second, how many parts are there? There's 17?! It was at this moment that I got too impatient to learn all the features in Blender necessary for making a donut. So I just decided to wing it and start modeling a low poly character. I've had the same character that I used to represent myself for several years, but with many different iterations. So this time I decided to make a minimalistic 3D version that was just as angular as the version in my last video was, but less static and with more expressive movements. This was my first attempt at sculpting out this vision, and I'm ashamed to say that something this lame took me 4 days to figure out. But I moved some faces around, made the torso look a bit more Dorito shaped, and added some robotic joints. Good enough. Now it was time to make some shaders for the character by connecting some nodes, which definitely took a few tutorials to understand. This is borderline incomprehensible. I decided upon combining Krugston's comic shader and the cell shading from Hi-Fi Rush. This was the result, and as you can see, lighter areas have halftones while darker areas have cross-hatching, while the shading is stratified into solid colors. I also gave the eye some bloom so that it glows ominously, and I used some vector math nodes to create some fake backlights that were controlled by points instead of actual lighting, courtesy of this tutorial. All that's left for the character now is some bones, so that I can actually animate it. And using Joey Carlino's rigging tutorial, I put together a rig using inverse kinematics, which I'd love to explain, but I don't think I can keep your attention for that long talking about inverse kinematics without some Subway Surfers gameplay on the bottom. This rig can be procedurally animated with keyframes, but I decided to make each frame manually using constant interpolation to get some more expressive poses and stylized movements, just like Spider-Verse. And now you know why this video literally took ages to make. Up next, I decided to make the first scene for the video you're watching right now. I'm not going to go into every single detail, but this scene basically uses the many features of Blender to be completely modular. And what I mean by that is just about everything is procedural in some way. For example, the mountains and gravestone use noise maps to displace a flat plane accordingly. And using a geometry node setup, the trees can be drawn with a pen tool. However, because I skipped the donut tutorial, I was still in tutorial hell while making this scene. You see these blades of grass that flow in the wind? I used this tutorial to set them up. And the trees that you can draw into the scene, couldn't have made them with without this video. I did make some of the things of my own though, like these procedural clouds using Blender's geometry node editor. They've got the toon shader, they orbit the center, and use the Pythagorean theorem to make far clouds move slower. And even though I made a good half of this scene on my own, it still didn't feel like my own accomplishment. So I decided to go all out and make one more scene using everything that I learned up until this point. I got started by inverting the default cube to make a room, adding a table, and then using some bump nodes in the shader editor to make some realistic looking textures. I then recreated my keyboard, and after adding a touch of gamer RGB with bloom, it turned out surprisingly realistic, besides the fact that I got away with not adding letters. Then I started making the PC, and using the same gamer glow as before, as well as a glass shader for the panel. I think this is the coolest 3D thing I've made yet. And then I went on to add the rest of the objects to the setup, including a mouse pad with my logo on it, a monitor that can display videos using an MP4 as a shader, a microphone, an amp and DAC, some Krugston posters just as a little Easter egg, a gaming chair with a crackled leather texture, and a fresh can of Diet Uranium 238. And after setting up the lighting, bringing in my character, making a bunch of animations, and getting some cool camera angles, I was pretty much done with my Blender journey. I did exactly what I sought to do. I put together a Blender project that was my own. And wow, if you showed this to me a year ago and told me that I made it, I wouldn't believe you. Obviously there's a lot that can be improved, but I'm just getting started. And for my second scene ever, I'm pretty proud of how well it turned out, even if I'll look back and hate it a couple years later. And so concludes the 5 months I spent learning Blender and making this video. There's a lot of details about the process that I didn't include, but I want to finish this video eventually. And I gotta say, the best part about completing a journey like this is looking back at where you came from, because nothing screams improvement like cringing at your past work. And that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I've got big plans for this channel, as I'm already working on a new game, and hopefully it won't take as long as this video did. I will say though, making this video kinda introduced me to a more ideal perspective. In my eyes, it doesn't matter how long these videos take. My new aim is for every project I make to be better than the last, because at the end of the day, I'm not a YouTuber, and this isn't a YouTube channel. This is a portfolio. Thank you for watching. Oh, and if you're gonna subscribe, you might as well hit the bell too, since my upload schedule is inconceivable.